Thank you, Marty. It's a real pleasure for me to introduce Dr. James Wilson Smith. Now, you can tell from that name that he's from the Caribbean community, otherwise known as Jimmy. Now, it reminds me a little bit of our former president, who's now in hospice care. He's also known as Jimmy, and I believe he was James Earl Carter, right? So similar background in a way. So in some ways, Jimmy and I seem to have fallen in a number of footsteps. I was looking over his CV, which was still saying he was the Director General, or the DG as they know it throughout the empire, of the International Livestock Research Institute, which is the premier livestock research organization in the world. It's part of the AGNR system of international research organizations, and it's headquartered both in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa, and in Kenya, in Nairobi. And one of the ways in which we literally were in each other's, we may have passed each other there, is one of my sabbaticals in 2001. I spent 7 months or so at Ilvery, living in one of the little cabins, two pools they call them, and actually was there on 9/11 and happened to be in the club. It was in the evening there, and they had CNN on, and I watched the planes crash into the tower. And not everybody was shocked or dismayed by that, so I started to feel a little paranoid. So I did note, and I note this with great optimism and enthusiasm, because our international programs office has been a little quiescent, I would say, over the decades. That under Jimmy's leadership, the Ilvery budget increased from some 44 million to 105 million. So we're looking forward to good things happening. But wait, there's more. He worked for the World Bank for 5, 6, 7 years prior to that. So he was the DJ for 10 years, and then he worked at the World Bank. He was sort of the lead livestock person for all their livestock portfolios. And there, the budget increased from 200 million worldwide projects to 1.5 billion. So I think it's with great expectation that we welcome to the University of Maryland. And I may have to put off my retirement for a few more years to participate in all the good things that are undoubtedly going to happen at the International Programs Office. No pressure at all, Jimmy, but please come up and tell us about your thoughts.
Well, thank you. And perhaps I should quit while it's on my head, because with that sort of introduction. I had seriously been here a week when I got a message from Ray, could you come and give an informal seminar? Just, don't need any slides and so on. He lulled me into a false sense of security, because here we are, with so many impressive people. I did prepare a few slides, and my point of departure is going to be the university would like its program, or ICANN, its international program, to be much bigger, more elevated than it is. There's lots going on already, mind you, but it'd like to be bigger and better. But this would have to be essentially resource mobilization to have it done, because there's not a big budget put to that. So my point of departure, therefore, is how can we, if we're going to be doing resource mobilization, how can we then connect this university to some of the most pressing global challenges? And is if we were able to make those connections, that I think we'd be able to do a lot of grant making for our faculty, staff, and students to work overseas, and for people from overseas, our partners, to come here. So my point of departure is about what are those big global challenges that we need to be responding to? And I don't know, first of all, today is International Women's Day. And so salute all the women of our campus and our college, hence my color today. In case you were wondering why such a brash set of colors. It's not moving.
Yeah, we're just.
Okay, now it's. So I wanted to divide this talk into two parts. First, as I said, the international context and challenges that we must relate to if we are going to reposition or position ourselves more prominently in the international development arena. And then to look at those challenges in the context of opportunities for us. So I start with the first section. And so the big global agenda is the Sustainable Development Goals. Have you heard about these? Right, so I need not say much about this. But prior to these goals, there were what was known as the Millennium Development, which were entirely about what needs to be done in developing countries. Food security, poverty, and so on. Those were replaced by the Sustainable Development, which were adopted by all the member countries of the United Nations. So these are not just about what's happening in the developing world, but they are seen as common goals that the whole world could aspire to, the United States included. And 191 members, the United Nations, have endorsed these goals. So this is the currency of international development at the present time. Not surprising, you will see poverty and hunger are goal number 1 and number 2. And then, of course, there are many issues there, as you can see, our natural resource agenda, while land, life on land, water, climate, and so on. 17 of them, which are the big currency that the developing world is talking about. If they're talking about that, what are we talking about? I was very impressed to find that the college strategic, I'm going to try to take off this banner. Okay. The college has 5 strategic initiatives. And when you look at these, they map very nicely onto the Sustainable Development Goals. Healthy food systems and nutrition, advanced, innovative, profitable, sustainable agriculture, clean and healthy Chesapeake Bay, the whole world talks about. It's Mekong Delta, the Nile Basin, and all these very equivalent to how you manage these big systems, improve animal and human health, and optimize urban environment through design, green technology, and community engagement. These goals map very nicely onto the Sustainable Development Goal. So, the global currency, our marching orders. If you play golf, you'd say it's well teed up on the first tee to hit the long drive. And I was really, really impressed to see but let me use a few examples to translate those big goals into what I see as some of the big challenges, to break it down a little. And you can see, I don't want you to study any of these figures in great detail, they're just to illustrate. You can see that global population is still growing. It will not be until in the late 2050s that is likely to stabilize at over 10.5 billion people. That would be 2.5 billion more people than we have now. And as this slide illustrates, and I don't want you to look at all this, just this part. By 2050, we will need to be producing 56% more food than we produced in 2010. Now, this much more food, and others, this is a low number, others have put this number as 60 to 70% more food than we produce now. On a land base that some say is already meeting its ecological limits. It's only in Africa that there are some lands, as I understand it from the experts, where we can do more extensive agriculture, irrigation, taking more land into. The rest of the world, the land frontier has been reached. So this means we'd have to get this more food through productivity enhancement, improvements. Now, I don't know how many of you are scholars of Malthus. And if you go far back enough, you would have learned about the Malthusian theory, which says that population grows geometrically and food production grows arithmetically. And that means these two curves diverge and famines will ensue and we will all be consumed. That didn't quite happen. Famines did occur, but it didn't occur on the scale that Malthus anticipated, largely because of science. It was science that bridged those two divergent curves. So we're looking at science to bridge this gap. And here we are at Maryland, well-renowned institution for its science in agriculture and natural resources and environmental science. So this challenge, we're well prepared for. We can respond to this. We can contribute to this. Another example of why the challenges are important to us, and don't study this in any great detail. The only point I'm trying to make here is that this dreaded disease called African swine fever has moved out of Africa into Europe, into China. And a big concern of agriculturists here is that this disease could come. The United States, the pork industry is $54 billion. If this foreign disease were to come home here, it would be catastrophic for the industry. Another reason why the great science that we do at Maryland here should be working with partners to deal with those challenges before they come here. So it is not just charitable work we do, but enlightened self-interest. It is in our interest to fight these diseases overseas to help developing countries overcome them. Another example of the challenge to which we can respond. The pandemic. When I was at the bank, we wrote a lot. We were sure that a pandemic would hit, and many of us have said so. Not if, but when. And we did scenarios about what it would cost. And we came up with scenarios of billions. Well, it wasn't billions. It was trillions of dollars. And we still don't know the full effect because you have long COVID for a number of people who are suffering from this and the health effects that would go on forever. I listened to how it has been disruptive of the normal work and work rhythm and how cities such as San Francisco, which had many beautiful office towers with the IT people working there, now all empty and vacated. So the impacts of COVID has been enormous. And this wouldn't be the last pandemic, I grant you. So it's in our effort. There have been many before us, and we don't go back as far as the 1819 Spanish flu. which killed over 50 million people. There will be more, except if we are able to devote the work to do global surveillance better, to be able to develop vaccines very quickly, and to have more and better intergovernmental relations so that we can share information, support each other. When the pandemic struck, many people went home, especially those overseas went home. I'm Canadian, so tendency was to go back home, and that will be the safest haven. I stayed in Nairobi, but it was terrifying. I stayed in Nairobi because we had 800 staff all over the world. And I didn't want BC to be running away whilst all our staff are distributed and exposed. So I stayed in that, but it was terrifying, not knowing where this thing is going to go. And even when there were a vaccine, developing countries were the last to get them. And many of them still haven't. So this big area here, another challenge that we must or can support. Now I know if I went around the state and talked to farmers or legislators about why Maryland, why the University of Maryland should get involved in international ag and should spend more money on it, they will say to me, that's about overseas. University of Maryland should be concentrating on doing work for the state and for the government here. But I hope that if we were able to have an in-depth conversation, the illustrations that I just gave you would tell them that there's good reason why we should be doing this. It's in our own interest to be doing this. But if that did not sell, this graph, I hope, would help sell that. These are panels. Okay. These are panels of commodities, beef, milk, and cereals, and vegetables, and so on. And this is the potential growth in demand on the vertical, and the regions of the world on the horizontal. Note that in these graphs, North America demand is the smallest. Except, of course, fruits and vegetables, North America is going to have. But for most of them, North American markets are largely mature, saturated. The markets for American products, the growth markets, are in these other regions of the world. So it is not just to prevent disease or to avoid famines and so on, but our engagement globally is to help market Maryland and American products around the world. That's where the demand is going to grow. So that's my argument about why we should be more involved and the opportunities to do so. So let me come now to really some quick analysis. And mind you, I've been here 6 weeks. So these are preliminary thoughts on where we are and where we might go. First and foremost, we must build on current efforts. There's lots going on. The whole is not greater than the sum of the parts because it's not all connected. And it's not absolutely necessary that all should be connected. But we need to be able to sell the whole and try to make it greater than the sum of the parts. So we must build on the current efforts. And this is study abroad, partnerships with other universities. If you pay your tuition here, you can go to Cambridge or you can go to University of Nairobi. You pay your fees there, University of Nairobi students can come here and so on. Can we develop? Some of this is happening already. Can we develop this even more? as I said already, our strategic initiatives are mapped very well to the global currency for development. So given those challenges I just talked about, we need to look at the resources in our faculty, our staff, our facilities that we have here and around the state, research, teaching, and extension. Try to create a comparative advantage. What is our? We don't want to duplicate exactly what Cornell is doing or what Davis is doing. What's our comparative advantage? And then we link that up to the big challenges that we talked about. And that's where we can do the resource mobilization, grant making, part of the world that I have come from. My institution lived, and not a cent was subvention from anywhere. It was all grant making. But we need to do this really well in order to do grant making. And we need a consensus about what should be IPAN. What should IPAN be doing? What's our strategy? We're not going to do this all alone. The dean and others have said to me that we want to build partnerships here in the United States with other universities, but we also want to build on the partnerships we have in developing countries or developed countries and grow them. We already have a partnership with Daystar University in Nairobi, in Kenya. We need to look at, given our comparative advantage, who are the partners that we can work with locally, in the United States, I mean, and overseas. And then we need to mobilize resources. Anna and I are the only parts of IPAN. There's not much. We're accelerators, if you want to call it, or we're catalysts, if you want to call us that. Be mindful. If you know your chemistry, catalysts can speed things up or they can slow things down. But we can at best be catalytic. We are not going to do this ourselves. We're going to be having to work with all of you to do all these things I've been talking about. Matchmaking, looking for opportunities, connecting, and so on. I said this already, make the whole greater than the sum of the parts. So here is a bit of a operational concept. This builds on what the university is already. Research, education, extension, and partnerships. I put this as a big base because we'd have to build many partnerships to work on any of those challenges we talked about. We can't do it alone. And we're in College Park. We don't have direct access to those challenges I talked about. So you have to have partners in the developing countries so that we can have access. Faculty, staff, students can go there. So this is what I see as our operating model. I put the research a little bigger than the other two because I believe that's what the world would look to Maryland for. How can we help solve some of these big challenges? And then use research for students, undergraduate, graduate students. And if you're doing research, you have to get it into use. So extension. So some quick thoughts on the way forward. As I said, develop a strategy. We all need to own it. We all need to agree where is it we're going to go and how we're going to do it. It's not only what, but how we're going to do things. But we're not waiting on a strategy to start anything. We're going to be building on what we have. We have study abroad. Unfortunately, not many of our efforts have been sufficiently subscribed to this round to be going ahead. And I think we only have 2 with possibilities. 2 courses, one in Kenya and one in Vietnam. We should have many of these every year. The question is that it costs. That's a lot. And only the more wealthy students can afford it. So how can we make these more numerous, more accessible to more students? Based on our comparative advantage, develop opportunities to develop projects. Could be about vaccinology, could be in the environment. I've been talking to colleagues who are in the grant-making business and climate change. Methane, #1 person, their #1 antagonist here. Developing proposals, large proposals, with teams of faculties across disciplines so that we can mobilize resources from USAID, from the Gates Foundation. Bazios has just created a foundation and they haven't recruited a guy who's going to lead their agriculture part. And they want to focus on climate change issues, mitigation, not adaptation, mitigation. So we have a number of donors who want to support these development activities, and we have to mobilize around the challenges and build teams. We, as I said, can facilitate international work, and we want to continue to do that. So I didn't come with a check, nor would I have one any soon, because you're the people who can help us cut these checks. And Ann and I have been having many meetings and with a view of doing what we said, building on what we have. How can we grow the study abroad program, both in developed and developing countries? How can we finance this? How we can find resources for that? Matching our research capabilities with some of the big challenges, creating big projects and going to fund them. I used to be a donor myself at the World Bank and the Canadian Development Agency, and I know something about grant making. So I hope our office can help in that. So we're catalysts that I hope can speed things up. Thank you very much.
Time for questions from the audience, or if there's anyone online that would like to ask a question, you can unmute and do that.
Interesting, and I think that one, maybe it's a comment and partly a question, but I think there's been a lot of increasing challenges to work internationally over the last few years, and so some of us that maybe would have done that now hesitate more. And I would say one of those areas that comes to my mind is trying to recruit students from overseas, because we've been told that it's a nightmare in terms of trying to get visas and like that there's an increasing complexity to kind of do this type of work, and that the international office here at Maryland is overwhelmed. And so I guess, have you heard of some of these challenges? I mean, and maybe this is just an impression from a faculty member, and I need to be better educated.
I heard a lot about that.
Okay.
And I heard about the challenges in many different directions. That international work is not highly compatible with faculty looking for tenure. All right. Those faculty looking for tenure want to publish in high impact journals and so on and so on. I came from an organization that worked entirely for development, and our scientists publish in Nature and PANAS and all these high impact places. So it could be done. There's a perception that it can't be done, but it could be done. But the university also need to be more open about how to make it. So I'm working on a piece for publication, which I hope Ann and I would look at over the next few days, that is going to sort of say, look, if you really want to be international and do this, then you have to embrace it. The university has to encourage it. It is not just charitable. It's not the add-on. It's part of the core business. And so how to make that happen? Now, I know working in the World Bank, many of our meetings we had to put overseas because it became very difficult for our partners to get US visas, particularly if you come from certain countries. How to overcome that? I am not sure, but this is probably some heavy lifting that the whole university system, not just this college, the whole university system should be looking at, because we want more students from the developing countries come here. They are going to be our new markets, I told you. Those are our best ambassadors. We want them to come here. One comparative advantage we have that I hadn't mentioned, but will in the future, is that no other university of a land grant university is located in the Washington, D.C. area. Why is that? What is that advantage? We have access to the whole federal government. Easy access in proximity terms to create the dialogue. I mean, Texas A&M has a liaison person on the Hill working with the federal government. They're in Texas. We don't even have to send the person to Washington. We're here. We can have that. But do we do that work? At least I hadn't heard about it from the agriculture side. Maybe the rest of the university talks with the federal government. But we're here, we can do that. Many of the colleges who are in international ag have offices here in Washington, D.C. and have posted people here to work with aid and others and so on. Is our college prepared to do that? And in the context, the whole university system could begin to talk with the federal government about how to enable international students to come here, how to speed up screening, how to deal with all these kinds of things. So that's something we need to build a partnership for.
So you might have said this at the beginning. I apologize, I came in a few minutes late, and it might be too soon. 6 weeks, welcome. But what, as somebody, I'm a wildlife biologist, have some one-on-one relationships in Kenya through our chair, Bill Bowerman. And I have communications with them, and we've talked about amazing ideas we could do, me zooming in and teaching some classes for them, collaboration. What do you want from us at this point? Like, if it's, do you need time, or are those the kinds of things, because it's pretty small though, are those the kinds of things you want to know about to understand kind of the different things that we might be interested in growing, or are you not there yet?
Well, I'm there, but not there yet. But let me explain what I mean by that. We do want that. If you look at East Africa, Southern Africa, tourism based on game watching, safaris is a big thing. Numbers for the many species are declining. There are issues about how wildlife and livestock could coexist. Why should a Maasai who's protecting his livestock allow lions to eat their livestock if they're not going to get anything from the tourism? All these kinds of things. So not only the biology and the ecology of wildlife and wildlife management, but the economics, all this sort of stuff. Highly relevant. People want to get a better understanding. How can we deal with some of these biophysical, biology, economic factors? So yes, all this is on tilt. The opportunity is that it would be for you to say, look, given my understanding of this problem, here's a good idea that I think we can do. Do you know about a donor who I can sell this to? That's where I don't have the knowledge, nor does Anna or you to develop the projects ourselves. What I could try to talk about is the challenges and hope that the great scientists we have said, you know, what I'm doing here about vaccines, instead of working on a vaccine by virus, can we get a vaccine to tackle families of viruses? We can deal with this. Let me look for some money. So that's how I see us operating at the present time. Trying to connect Maryland to the science, to the challenges brought. And then you clue in and say, this is how I could contribute.
If it's of any help, in a couple of weeks, I'll be in Malawi in Tanzania at the Sokoine University in Tanzania, and I'll hoping to support the graduate students. I'll be talking to the people at the University of Malawi,
Right.
The AGNR, they're in the long way. I can carry a message, meet with people if you want. I'll probably be going back again this summer.
Right.
There's some kind of letter of understanding, some kind of program we'd like to get going, either in teaching or research.
I think what we need to do is to try to look at this comparative advantage and say, where are the things we're going to want to do, and where can we focus on doing them, and then build the partnerships. If Tanzania is a good place to work with, and Sokoine is a good place to do that. To find partners who are located there, because they're going to have to facilitate our access on our legal persona for working there. So Sokoine is well known, well established, very strong institution. That's probably the kind of institution that we should have a strong memorandum of understanding in the future that says your students can pay tuition there and come here to do the coursework with Bill or somebody there, and what you pay for is your board, and vice versa. Those are the connections we need to build on. I don't have a list of that yet because I don't have a good feel about where we need to work based on our comparative advantage. But not only in the developed countries, we need to build in the developing countries. We need to build these partnerships with the developed countries as well. Australia, New Zealand, UK, and so on. Is there anything I said that you didn't disagree with? You didn't agree with?
I have a question online from Dr. Shermohamedi Adel. Do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Sure. Dr. Smith, Jimmy, welcome aboard. I hope we'll find opportunities to work together, and we are here to support you, and I'm sure you're here to support us. So thank you for your great presentation. One of the things that I think you sort of touched upon it, and that is, I think university-wide, number one, budget always has been restricting in terms of some of the international activities of faculty. Second thing is that and you point to that, the publication that faculty rely on, lots of times international type, even research-based, until it comes and renders a publication, it really takes long time, and sometimes it even doesn't. However, we have to really sort of focus on the fact that, you know, that goodwill, that interaction that is created through this international work, in fact, provides a platform for students, young generation, to apply and come here if the funding were available. In other words, this almost I would say like tripartite type of approach, you know, research on one hand, and student recruitment on the other, and basically goodwill, you know, people to people relationship that goes long ways to generate long-term sort of collaboration. What do you think about all those? I mean, how do we convince university that these are very important?
Yeah, well, I want to work with all of you to be able to convince the university that this is important. So I started from reading what's at the very top. I read Fearlessly Forward, the president's own message. There's smatterings of about global things there. So at least there are connection points. You said it, so okay, we're gonna do it, so we need that. So, yeah, we have to convince our hires that this is not add-on. This is part of core business. For some of the reasons I tried to describe to you. I don't know, I mean, not a great example I could put out. I don't know many of you who've heard about UG91. UG91 or is 94. A wheat rust that broke out, I think it's 94 because it's Uganda 94. That's where it gets its name. And it was such a deadly rust. It was sweeping through Asia, the Middle East, and of course, parts of Africa, wiping out wheat. And of course, the wheat plant now is such, it's not a diverse genotype anymore. It's very concentrated genes for production and so on and so on. The projection was that this rust would have wiped out 80% of the wheat for the world if it were allowed to do that. An international consortium was formed. Kansas State was the big leader from the US, with Australia and the CG centers where I work, because they have the germplasm for all the wild types of it. Quickly, they were able to find resistant cultivars and integrate those genes into to avoid that crisis. So these are, it's no longer charity. It's no longer charity. It used to be. It is very much core business for our economic, but the development and growth of the university, have more international students as well coming, and more of our students from the United States going. It's a big village. And despite all the political talk you hear these days, it's really a big village. And we must continue through education. You know, when politics intervenes and so on, what is allowed to persist is academics and this is where we should keep things going, getting our students into the developing world to benefit from that experience and vice versa. So all the things you said resonated with me, sir. The question is, how do we do them? And one of them is to get hired up to see that this is really important. And to encourage more budget. At the present time, the only means I see us funding this is through grant making. But the university could put some of its own money into it to facilitate that, or to match grants and so on. And I anticipate that our grants would be about research, but it would also have their graduate students or undergraduate students written into those grants so that they can be financed as well. So research is the vehicle for getting students in both directions, graduates and undergraduates. Now, I've been here 6 weeks. Maybe in 6 months, you tell me there's not a pipe dream, no one is interested. This is, I don't think so. The impression I have is that this is a good time. Bill, you agree?
Yeah, how many of you are interested in international work?
There you go. Practically everybody.
There you
There you go.
I think the challenge is getting support from the university. If you look at the strategic plan, there's very little about international programs. It's really a domestic focus of this administration. So I think that's a battle that the dean needs to have with those folks.
Absolutely. And this is part of my job. Press the dean, to press the provost, to press the president. So I'm going to be quite a nuisance in that regard. I'm not going to be here just to hang around and putter around and do few things. I came here because I saw an opportunity to match my background with what needs to be done. If it's not going to be done, then that would be no big loss to the university, but I can tell you, I'm saying that because I'm not just going to putter along, I'm going to be pushing these things.
I think one of the challenges they see international programs is kind of an elitist type of program for the wealthy students for the most part. I think that's one of the battles.
Lots of perceptions we have to change, and they're real fast. So why they all the private universities, not all, but many of the private universities have very big international programs. Columbia University has a campus in Nairobi, and so do many private universities. Well, of course, we can say they have a lot of private money to do it. But there are also land grant institutions that are doing much more than we're doing.
One of our best doctoral students got a Fulbright in a year or so. So those are opportunities, graduate students who can compete with Fulbright. There's different opportunities.
Right. There's no one silver bullet. There are going to be many flowers that's going to be blooming.
So sort of tying together the notion that we look for our comparative advantage and we look to see where it makes the most sense. And then we realize that our university, or at least our college maybe, isn't the most supportive. And then we have someone from international programs, that's from the World Bank and understands development. Where are there other pots of money and how do we ask for them?
Well, this is why the people I've been talking to on the outside. I was on the Hill a few days ago at our function, but I met many high ups from USA, deputy administrators, and people like that. So we're in a game now. Maryland is in this game. I want you to come here, talk to people, tell them what. And so, Gates Foundation, Perseus, the World Bank itself. You gotta get much better known here. Maryland's faculty could be very much part of the expertise that the World Bank can call on to do things analytical work, investments, and so on. Gift-free, international food policy. I know the World Bank's a hard place to work with, but there's opportunity. But you have to get known. We have to be known that we have a lot of great people here doing great things. And they don't know about us because they don't read the scientific journals.
So Ray wants to get a comment in here, but we're running out of time, so
Useful.
we're gonna in the last 15 seconds.
So 25 years ago, we did have a presence. We had some people retired from the World Bank. Actually, Camboli was involved with this. And we served as an educational arm to the World Bank and AID here as an environmental model. One of the things we did, and this went on for a couple of years.
This is sounding like more than 15 seconds, correct?
Is that we educated the World Bank. You remember how the environment and agriculture don't talk to each other, right? They're enemies. We brought them together in the Chesapeake Bay to show them how these fields are working together. We did trips and week-long workshops and stuff like this. So the University of Maryland got contracts to do this. I was involved with that. It was very useful for us. And it would be useful, we're the institution here that can do that kind of thing for all the world and national institutions that are here in Washington.
So thank you very much for coming and joining us today. We're continuing the conversation, hopefully we keep this conversation going, right?
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Pleasure being here.